Bob Van Every and Claire, Faulkner, New York. Were you destined to get into the law?
Oh, not at all.
Yeah.
I went to pharmacy school and became a licensed pharmacist. I decided I was bored out of my mind. Actually, I was bored my last year of pharmacy school, so I took the LSAT just as a lark, get my mind kick-started. And after I had practiced pharmacy for a year or two, I said, nah, I think I will go to law school.
So was there anybody in your family that had ever gone into law? Was there any history of that?
My great-grandfather apparently was a pettifogger. So other than that, no.
And Faulkner, you're native of Faulkner.
Yep.
And Bob and Kay, your mom and dad.
Dad was the mayor of Faulkner.
Right.
They owned a hardware store.
Yep.
Yeah.
And did you work there? Was that part of your upbringing?
They bought it when I was 14. And so, yes, from that point on, it was certainly part of my upbringing. When I came back from college and law school on summer breaks or holidays, I would work in the hardware store. That was part of the deal.
And by the way, for the camera, I was born on a day which was a part of your family lore as well.
That's right. My sister Barbara and you were born the same day. And then after that, my daughter and your first daughter were born on the same day. All at Jamestown WCA.
That's right. And we had a steak dinner together.
That's right.
Yeah. The serendipity of life. So you find yourself pharmacy school and then decide that you take the LSAT. And did you know where you might go to law school?
I wasn't sure. I put applications in, at a couple places. In fact, I was accepted the same as Greg Yaw at Washington University in St. Louis. But decided to go to the University of Buffalo. I got early admission there, and I knew Buffalo. I didn't want to learn another city.
Right.
So decided to stay in Buffalo, and did so.
A little less expensive, too, being a native of New York.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. So
you went to UB Law School and graduated when?
1975.
75. And when did your paths cross with young Judith Claire?
We started the same year. Our first class was civil procedure, taught by Professor Jake Hyman, who stood in front of the class by the door, and I sat in the back of the class as far away as possible so you didn't get called on with the Socratic method. And I had met in the introductory meeting of the class a fellow by the name of Bill Savino. And Bill and I were seated together at the back of the class, and the door burst open halfway through the class. And there stands my wife-to-be.
No kidding.
She had, her bike had crashed. The handlebars came off. And coming to law school, so she was late. And I turned to Bill, just apropos of nothing, and said, I'm going to marry that girl. So that's when we first met.
Well, she didn't realize you had first met them, but that's first observation.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And she made an entrance.
Yeah, quite an entrance.
So you really were in the class together.
Yeah, we graduated together.
So you graduated together, and but it wasn't clear that you were coming back to Faulkner, was it?
I wasn't even clear when I graduated that I wanted to practice law.
Mm-hmm.
I did it because my mind was just not into pharmacy. So after the day after the bar, I drove a classmate's U-Haul to Chicago, helped her unload. Next morning, she dropped me off at the western edge of Chicago, and I hitchhiked to Montana and did a Sierra Club trip. We built some trail, and then I hitchhiked back and said to Judy, hi, I'm home. And she and I had planned to go on a canoe trip with Bill Hoyt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Rich Tobey, and a bunch of guys, Dave Shepard, Raleigh Kidder, and she was going to come with her good friend Susan Bring, who married Rich Tobey, who was Bill Hoyt's legislative aide. But something came up and the two females couldn't go. When I came back from that trip, Judy had a job lined up in Albany working for Hugh Carey in his administration. So I moved her out there and we were going to get married. She didn't want to live in a small, she wanted to live in a small town, excuse me, but did not want to live in Faulkner because if it didn't work out, she knew she'd never get out. So I took a job in Ogdensburg, New York.
Okay. And
then after we were there for a couple of years, Faulkner started to look better. The winters up there never got above 32.
There you go.
We're usually around 0. So we came back to Faulkner and set up a practice.
So in Ogdensburg, did you practice law there?
Yeah.
And what did you do? Did you have with another law firm, or?
I did. I was the third attorney in a three-man law firm with me. The day after I was admitted to the bar, I was handed a file and said, "Here, this is yours," and it was a criminal case. And I had a jury trial 3 days later.
Oh my gosh.
So,
welcome to small practice.
Yeah, I did a union contract, excuse me, a pension fund for a union. I did real estate. I did just about everything. It was a very general practice law firm.
Did you live up there and she commuted to Albany?
We got married in the spring. I moved there in January. She was working in Albany, and then we moved up there.
Yeah.
So, in fact, she flew back from my brother's graduation from the Air Academy, where she'd gone out with my family to see him graduate, and we got married when she got back.
So she's testing this out to see if rural living works before she makes the big commitment to come to the Van Every homestead.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she wanted a small town.
Yeah.
That's why, I mean, I had an offer from the American Pharmaceutical Association to be their counsel, and she wanted a small town, and so did I.
You are now eyeballing Faulkner, New York, coming back here to your, being a native of Faulkner. You got Judy in tow. Did you know where you wanted? I mean, did you want to practice in Faulkner, set up your shop there? Was there a sense to be yourselves, or was there maybe somebody else you want to join with?
Well, starting a law practice from scratch when you're both, as husband and wife, going to be looking for your support from that practice is a scary undertaking. So I made some phone calls to attorneys back here and almost went in with one, but did not work out. That attorney had decided they were going to go into a partnership with somebody else, and I wasn't crazy about the idea of that partnership with somebody else. So we finally decided to rent some office space and bought some books and opened the door.
Now, you bought books from, did you buy from another firm, a retiring firm? That was a big expense.
No, I bought from the publishers.
Did you?
Yeah.
At a time, they were our best friends. They came by all the time.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
So where were you located?
Kitty corner from the high school in Faulkner. A chiropractor by the name of Fred Giddy.
Fred Giddy, okay.
Who's still alive. Had an office space open up in his office building. So that's what we rented.
Okay. Did you get a sense of what you, was it going to be a jack of all trades, master of none startup, or did you have a sense of areas where you think you might want to focus in on?
I could have had a job in Buffalo with one of the larger law firms, but I figured I'd end up in a cubbyhole, which I did not want. So a general practice is what I wanted. So that's what we did. If it came through the door, we serviced it.
Was there a time when perhaps there was areas which Judy felt more comfortable in doing the litigation aspects of it, and you maybe the transactional aspects of it? Do I have that kind of right?
That's exactly what happened. We were both doing everything. And over the course of the 15 years we were in partnership, she really enjoyed and was really good at litigation. And I, although I run my first 10 cases, was much more comfortable doing transactional law. I enjoyed things to do with taxes, and that's transactional law, not criminal law. Mm-hmm. And not a lot of litigation doesn't involve it either. So I ended up transactional law, did a lot of, as you know, business deals and things of that nature.
And wonderfully so. In fact, you had a great reputation for an incredibly competent, detailed guy. And take that as a compliment.
Thank you.
Because we knew we had to work if you were on the other side on the detail. Was there a go-to person for you when you are out on your own as a solo practitioner, and it's really just you and your wife, which is a different dynamic than somebody that's a little bit maybe older? Did you have anybody like that?
Well, in terms of real estate, I met Connie Zenz,
yeah,
who was not then, but who became president of Chautauqua Abstract. And Connie was a invaluable resource in terms of real estate. And I had Warren's Weed, and I had Warren's Heaton. So I had good books. And I kept in contact with some of my law school professors. I mean, I canoed with one of them up until about 10 years ago. So I had resources I could rely on. And in terms of bouncing ideas off of, I had Bill Savino,
yeah,
a bright guy.
Great.
And we would just go through something that either of us had an issue with. So that was very helpful. But as to a mentor, I wouldn't say so, no.
Faulkner, I don't know at the time, I kind of always lose track of the timeline, was really Bob Van Every and Lucian Ledestro. Was Lucian a presence then?
Lucian actually left Faulkner just before I came back.
Okay.
And moved up to Jamestown into the Furniture Mart building, okay, with Art Bailey. Mm-hmm. He kept the office space and would send Mike Goldman down from time to time.
Okay.
So I guess I don't think there were any other attorneys in Faulkner. Sam Edson, you may not remember.
I remember, but he'd retired.
Yeah, Sam had retired. In fact, he gave me his photocopy machine and a desk and a couple other things. But yeah, he had retired. And
was that deemed to you to be a favorable thing or an opportunity, let's say, with Lucian's, who is a presence, out of the area, physically out of the area, and you sort of being now the Faulkner attorney, the guy who had a shingle?
Well, I think that having the office there just made it easier. I mean, a lot of people shopped in Faulkner. Yeah. So I was right there.
Yeah. Did you have any sense of, I know you're so active in so many things, Bob, but did you have any sense of public service at all? Whether it was public defender, district attorney. Now I know you're judge, we can talk about your wife in a second, but for you personally, was that of interest?
I actually became a public defender. Lynn Hartley was running for office. I helped him with his first campaign. He knew Richard Slater, who was head of the public defender's office. He put in a good word with me, and Richard offered me a job. Part-time, which is what I wanted, which was ideal. I had done a lot of criminal defense work from traffic violations to Class B felonies
Mhm.
when I was in Ogdensburg. So I felt very comfortable in a court of law.
Yeah.
My father had been mayor of Falconer, was very active in politics, and I swore I would never, never become a politician. He was very busy because of that.
Yeah.
I decided not to be.
And as public defender, how long were you? Was it a couple years?
10.
10? Oh my gosh, how did I miss that? Was there geography that you were particularly involved in?
Well, of course, the town of Ellicott.
Yeah.
But no, you ride circuit when you're in a public defender or a DA's office. So.
Was there a trial or two of note that you'd say, Greg, I don't think I ever told this story, but this is kind of an interesting one as far as just being a public defender, without naming names, that was kind of unique, interesting?
Probably the most interesting one was the one I had when I was town attorney for the town of Ellington. There was a house that was totally decrepit, and the owner was from Buffalo. And he decided to appear pro se in front of Judge Rogalski down in Ellington. And he, he just was an interesting guy. He lost in the town court, so he appealed it up to Judge Ward in Mayville. And he walked into the appeal and handed the judge a ring of feathers, eagle feathers or bird feathers, Your Honor. That was basically his defense. That was his appeal. Maybe the most interesting case I had.
Yikes.
Yeah.
There you go. So, was there a point in time when your wife walks or goes over the breakfast table and says, honey, I'm thinking about running for judge in the family court. What do you think?
And I said, no, you don't want to do that. Politics can be a very nasty business. And my wife is a very good person. And I just dreaded seeing her get involved in that. Yeah. She had made up her mind, and and when it was dealt with her, knows you don't change that once it's made up.
How does one create a committee? Had she been I know the answer, but she'd been approached by the Democratic Party, Ted Smith, and but you didn't see that coming, did you? Would you have forecast that she would?
No. No, I mean, she was a very good trial attorney, was doing very well with it, seemed happy with it. But I think certain things happened that made her decide, well, why not?
Yeah.
Not do that.
Well, she said there was no greater supporter than one Bob Van Every in doing so. But as the campaign wore on, to balance the actual campaigning and the running of the office, because you have cases, she had cases, you have cases, transaction going on. How did you balance all that?
Well, I guess we're both very hard workers. So I picked up some of her load, and she was very vigilant protecting her clients. She put in many long hours, plus raising 2 children. Yes.
I don't know that, again, the timeline. When did you had an associates or a couple of associates, didn't you, over the time of Van Every and Claire?
Well, Beverly Unger came to work for us after she graduated from UB. Bob Nieder was in the office for a year or 2. Rick Goodell was there for about a year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Your wife was not successful the first time of the run, and was that hard for her to pick up. I don't want to tell anything out of school, but there's a moment, the election results are in, and I know it took a while to get those absentee ballots came in, and then all of a sudden it's done.
Yeah.
The energy of the level, the race, and then it's over and it's not where you wanted it to be. Was it hard kind of for the firm to gear up? Was there a pause?
Well, we took a pause. We took a week off and went out of town. But it was a very busy practice. So, you know, you get back to work.
Yeah. She then subsequently is successful, and therefore he puts on the robes as a family court. She talked about her first day when she forgot to put on her robes, which was a funny story. So now she's out of the practice, and that takes you out of family court practice as well.
What a blessing!
Yeah, and now it's sort of you. It's no longer Van Every and Claire, two people going to the job together. It's just you. What's the transition like?
Well, I picked up her cases to close them out. Those she wasn't able to. So I was doing work that I wasn't as familiar with as I had been years earlier, and that did not last that long. She had done a pretty good job of cleaning things up.
Yeah.
And she continued to help with the books. So I would say the transition went pretty smoothly. I think I decided that my true calling in life was getting her calmed down at the end of a day on the bench. You see a lot of unpleasantness as a family court judge.
Well, she mentioned with a great deal of favor how you were able to be her muse, her resource, because it's pretty lonely as a judge.
Yes, it is. And she was very devoted to the job, devoted to the clientele, was always very concerned that they had justice done in her court as quickly as possible, as expeditiously as possible. So she would, she brought things home in her mind and would toss and turn at night and talk about facts without names over dinner. She just needed a sounding board.
Yeah.
So I've served that role, I guess.
You serve many roles, and when I think about Van Every, I often think of many things, but the Watershed Conservancy. So whenever there was an environmental easement, whether there was a potential transaction with some of our clients, and you'd be talking to John Jablonski, next thing you know, you're really talking about Van Every. How did you get involved with them? Because that's really part of your world.
They came to the office, and be John, Becky, came with some others who started and founded the Watershed, came to the office and wanted to incorporate so they could become a not-for-profit. And that was my bailiwick much more than Judy's. So I set them up, got them their not-for-profit status, and then just started doing work for them. I mean, both Judy and I supported their mission, so we were happy to do the work and not be able to charge them, not have to charge them. So did a lot of work for them. It was, I mean, John just was an amazing executive officer for that organization. Gave up a good job with the city planning department to take on that role. I really respect John for what he did, and that helped me feel free to donate my time to the Watershed.
Well, and it's a significant pro bono effort that you did, and I hope somebody someplace, I know you don't seek it, that's not you, but recognizes that, and I'm sure they do. In fact, for the camera, Bob, is there a sense of, because I think it's huge, what the Watershed Conservancy has accomplished for an acreage, just when it started, there was a whole lot of non-ownership, but all of a sudden they own easements and actual outright fee title.
Yeah, they have, I think, fee to over 1,000 acres around the lake. But that includes some land in town of Stockton along the Cassadaga Creek and now Cassadaga Lake. And some of the uplands now have become part of their land holdings, part of their stewardship. And they're serious about protecting what it is they've become owner of. And we did an interesting transaction with the Lutheran Synod for Upper New York, where we got a conservation easement for them. Tom Barney, if you remember him, he was with Phillips Lytle. And I negotiated for over a year to put that one to bed. But I think it protects a lot of the shoreline in the northern basin of the lake.
I remember that because Tom brought me in at the very end saying, "Do you know anything about an conservation easement?" Sure, of course. But that's one of the many times, and I think you did a similar thing with the contiguous owner, Marty Coyle.
Yeah.
Marty Coyle.
Yep.
Who bought it from Norberg.
Right.
Was this environmental work, is that something that came natured to you? Is that a, the Audubon Society, I think of you and the Audubon Society and stuff. Was that part of your passion?
I was the president of the Environmental Law Society in law school. So
before there was really such a word almost.
Yeah.
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 But you found that a passion, and you've made such a commitment to our area, Bob. Let me just say thank you, because sometimes you don't get that chance to do that. So
you're welcome.
I also have an image, and this might be making this up now, but with Roger Tory Peterson, he once gave a walking tour of his area, and I filmed it. It was just one of those guys who walked around. And there were a few people who were in a group with that. I don't know if you were part of that.
No, of course not.
Okay. I was going to give you more credit.
I used to take the walks with Gib Burgesson instead.
Yeah. So your practice of law is such that it continues, by the way, for those on camera. This is 2021, and Bob, though we're mostly known as retired, isn't anything but, as he's in the office quite a bit. As you think back of being a sole practitioner, and people who might see this film are sole practitioners. They come out of law school. They don't necessarily tie up with a firm. Could you give them guidance? Could you give them a sense of perhaps the do's and don'ts of what it might be? Because you have been, I say, very successful sole practitioner until you quasi-retired and joined the Lundberg practice here. Could you give me some advice?
Well, I can give it to you from a 40-year perspective. I think things have changed in the practice of law. I found that a good set of books was pivotal. Again, I had Warren's Weed, Warren's Heaton. I had books, I think a 31-volume set devoted to commercial law. So a good set of books was invaluable and probably necessary. It's a lot of work, a lot of moving parts. But very rewarding, very enjoyable, which is why I still do it. There's always the new case that comes through the door that just lights up all the circuits. So wow, this is going to be fun. So I think it's a challenge. But, and I don't know, I understand that the newer generation often does everything on their own, does not have a secretary. I had the same secretary for over 30 years, so that she knew what my writing said. She had an idea of time frames when things needed to get out. That was so important. In fact, I spoke with her the other day. She wants to get back into it herself. She said, I'm bored. So, just planning a lot of hours. And I think that's the practice of law often anyway. You deadlines and trials, and you have to be prepared for them. You have to meet them. So.
I'm going to do what I did with your wife, show you the 1987 bar composite. And in fact, I've done this with all the 20, 30 interviews I've done with this bar members, which has been fun. Just to see if there's a name that evokes a story, a vignette, a quip, or something that may be of interest, because I'm looking at this more as preservation of history. That really is where it's come from, but often war stories always help preserve the history. So I'm gonna roll this over to you, Bob, and if you want to just sort of glance at it, and if there's anything that sort of jumps out, feel free to tell a story.
Well, Trip Wilson Price was a well-known attorney with a great sense of humor and a great sense of justice. He was an assistant district attorney, and I can remember one case in particular in the town of Ellington again, where we both were in front of the judge and asked for a minute to talk amongst ourselves. He said, I don't know what this case is here for, but you know, I got to do something. So I think we did an ACD, adjournment contemplation of dismissal, but Tripp was always trying to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And he understood that a prosecutor was not there only to get convictions, but to see that justice was done. I respected that greatly in him. Other attorneys whom I greatly respected were John Goodell, Andy's father, Rick's father, mm-hmm. And Bruce Carpenter, mm-hmm. both of whom always put their client's interest ahead of even their own. I mean, oftentimes they weren't paid. They did very good legal work just for the benefit of the client, to see that the justice was done. I respected both of them greatly. Bill Duncanson Sr. was a real fighter too. He bright guy, get up, feed the cattle in the morning, come into work from Sinclairville and put on a full day there. I used to see him when the Bar Association had a law library, and you may remember this.
There you go.
No, there was a law library on the second floor of Prendergast Library. And I would go up there and do research in books that I didn't have, and I'd run into Bill up there doing the same thing. So, very good attorney and very dedicated attorney. A lot of names I haven't seen in a long time. Wow.
Give me your best Howard Crosley story.
You see where my eyes were going, huh?
I see where everybody's eyes go there.
Bud dated my mother before my mother and father married. So I knew Bud from long before I was an attorney. And after he and Kay married, they bought a place out in Sinclairville, and you were probably there, and
sure.
You saw the Iroquois
Indian
on the hillside.
Where else could
That was Bud.
But for those on the camera, as you'd go out to Cockaigne, his house would be on the right, and you couldn't help but see this humongous Indian, which was on the roof for a long time on, was it Conte's beer distributorship or something like that?
Yeah, and there's that one or one like it along the thruway now between Silver Creek and Hamburg.
I've heard that it is, but yeah, regardless, if you want an image, but there it is. It was in Sinclairville.
Sinclairville, New York. Yeah.
But I mean, everybody says the same thing. But you know, it was important to, if you're going to have a transaction with him, and he was very theatrical. It was worth talking to him. Very entertaining guy.
Yep.
To try to do it before lunch was probably in everybody's best interest.
Yes. Yeah, Bud was pretty unique. Interesting guy.
And we're going to talk a little probably war talk here, but you can remember the days when you went to surrogate's court and outside of Judge Cass, and you had a matter, but you also were then kind of hung around. If you had a matter, you might get dragged in to be a guardian ad litem.
Oh, right.
With Autumn Slider saying, "Could you please act as guardian ad litem?" I think you'll find it all in order, which is like God or Moses getting the tablets, you know, like. But anyways, Bud Crossley would be there because his offices were nearby, and holding court. I mean, just standing. He wouldn't sit with us. He would stand, and he was a thespian. He really was one of the great.
He used to act in little theater productions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So funny. Whatever.
And Willard Cass.
Yeah.
That was the judge. We were sitting outside the courthouse.
That's right.
Willard was a real gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
A real gentleman. Yeah.
And of course, his clerk, Autumn.
Autumn was almost a mentor when you talk about mentors. She wasn't an attorney, but what a grasp of law.
That was the first call you made before you figured out what you really needed to have happen.
Yeah. Yep, and she was so helpful.
Yeah.
Just help you through everything. I was sorry to see her go, but her time had come. I guess she lived many years afterwards, but
yeah.
not as clerk. And then Lydia came in, as I remember.
Is that right?
Yeah, Lydia Romer, whom I also had a lot of discussions with. But Lydia and I would talk more about what's the law trying to do here.
Mm-hmm.
And I never talked to Lydia unless I'd reviewed the law before I made the phone call. But she also could be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very knowledgeable about surrogate law.
Did your paths cross Judge Adams?
Oh yes, oh yes. I tried cases in front of Judge Adams, and he was a very, very bright guy, and I think he was a little bored on the bench. He might have been happier continuing to practice law and use God's gift to him.
Mm-hmm.
But he certainly controlled his courtroom. Judy probably told you her favorite story.
No.
She was appearing in front of him in a I think it was a custody case, and Judy was trying to get testimony in about lice in this young person's hair, and the other attorney kept jumping up and objecting. And how do you know it was this? How do you know it was a louse? How do you know? How do you know? How do you know? And finally, Adams leaned over the bench and said, "Mr. What insect is it common to have in your hair?" End of the objections.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Judge Alessi? Guess he just passed away, didn't he?
Did.
Hopefully you were able to talk to him.
I did.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. Tried to be very fair, I think. Yeah. He and Bob started a practice. In fact, they're the ones who brought Fred Larson back to Jamestown.
as well as bringing.
Julie Wilson.
That's right.
Yeah.
Did you pass across with hers? I know that Judy's did a little bit because they're kind of the
Contemporaries.
contemporary and
Yeah. I did more with Brian, actually.
yeah.
Her husband. Yeah. Who lost his legs, as you know.
I do. Brian, just as an aside, did come back, gave a tour of the Jackson Center, and I interviewed him. It's on YouTube.
Good.
And his project, that name of the project that was going on in California when they'd lost his leg, was called the Nuremberg Project.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that was the name of it.
That was the name. You got to be kidding me. I mean, because I saw a picture and it was Nuremberg. Of course, we got a perfect segue to the conversation.
Sure.
Justice and stuff.
Yeah.
Now, you did work with Brian. Was he socially active here at the time?
Yeah, I would say that he was. Yeah, I mean, not as active as he became,
Right.
but yeah, he always had those concerns.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I knew his brother, who was a teacher at Jamestown High School.
Hmm.
And Julie she didn't practice long, I don't believe, here.
No, I think she went down to D.C.
Yeah.
I think that's where she ended up.
She's still alive?
You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't say.
Yeah.
Not sure.
Well, you know, it was, and again, I don't want to tell tales out of school, but we, at the time, when your wife came here, there really was just Julie and Cindy, my wife.
Right.
Sort of the three practicing lawyers at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if your wife, felt they get treated adversely or not, but you don't even think about it now because we have so many women in the bar. It's just, in fact, we probably have a majority.
I think law school classes are often majority female now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it was a different time.
Yep. The world has turned.
And just in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Other names that may have jumped out, like Al McKee or.
Al had retired to the Department of Social Services by the time I came back.
Yes.
So I really didn't have any transactions with him.
Yeah.
Joe Gerasi, of course, who hired Judy as his law clerk.
She mentioned that, yeah.
When she became, after she'd lost the election for family court in 1988.
Did she have to give up her practice then, or was she doing a little bit of both?
Actually, that is when she gave up her practice now. When she transitioned into family court judge, she had to give it up because she was deciding cases involving the attorneys in town.
Yeah.
So,
Me too.
yeah. And like Paul Andrews had to give up his job in the DA's office to go clerk for John Ward. Yeah. A lot of times passed us by, hasn't it, Greg?
I have a very close relationship with Dave Blossom. And I'm not sure many members of the bar would really know about David. And could you expound a little bit on him?
Probably not as well as my wife.
Yeah.
But David was married a woman from the town of Kyantone. And David was a lawyer. He became a justice of the peace in the town of Kyantone and would very occasionally represent someone, and often from the town of Kyantone. David was a very considered individual. I don't think he ever spoke right off the cuff. Even in a conversation, there would be a pause as he analyzed what he was about to say.
Mm-hmm.
He would call me from time to time if he had a client who presented an issue that he wasn't comfortable handling, and either refer the client to me or seek my advice on how to deal with the situation he found himself in. He was a philanthropist.
Mm-hmm.
And he was somewhat eccentric. I can remember David walking around. He always wore gym shoes. Always.
Crazy.
That hat of his. Yes, and always carried the same old leather beaten up briefcase.
The trench coat.
Yeah. Interesting guy. Always found conversations with him enlightening.
Mm-hmm. He took an early interest in the Jackson Center, and he set up probably more funds with a variety of interests of his, including the space camp, which
Mm-hmm.
that was one. He'd go to the Community Foundation almost on a periodic basis with a check and an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always he was ahead of the curve in many senses.
Yeah.
Yeah, very philanthropic.
He oversaw the building of his own house in Kyantown. It had no wood in it.
Steel beams.
Yep, steel beams and concrete.
Yeah.
Pre-pour, pre-cast concrete slabs. Apparently he lost a family member in a fire and did not want to chance it again. So just another interesting guy.
Yeah. Was at his house several times, and he and Margaret, his
Mm-hmm.
wife, who was very, very involved in the, I don't know if she did theatrical productions, but she certainly was a supporter of the arts.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
And a delightful lady. Yeah, but it's funny, I think of, and I talked to your wife that way as well about David. I think of the two of you and David. Just come to mind.
Yeah.
A unique individual.
It certainly was. Always interesting stories coming out of New York City.
Yeah. He was a trust officer, I think. Or banker.
Yeah.
Banker, yeah. I did interview him, by the way. That one of my early interviews, way back when.
Yeah.
That's on YouTube. And that's something to do with really the real focus was he was at Nuremberg during the trial, maybe just passing through. He may have gone to the trial for a day,
Mm-hmm.
but there was a connect.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I sought him on. I said, "Oh, by the way, let's talk about your entire life."
Yeah.
So, anybody else of note there, Bob, as you're kind of segueing your way through that?
Tubi Scarpino. Another attorney who probably wouldn't ring any bells with the younger generation, but Tubi was a character too. I understood that he used to wait outside in other attorneys' offices to get the check on real estate transactions.
Really?
Is that closed? Where's my check? Just camp out till they wrote the check. So that was Tubi.
So, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time, and as we both reflected off camera, for those that are interested, about a lot of war stories of 40 plus years of practice. Any kind of closing words of advice you may give to attorneys as they're in their starting careers?
Well, first, let me thank you for your time, Greg, for not just myself, but for everybody else who you've spent time with to memorialize what we've done. I think I indicated when I first began answering questions and speaking was that I went to law school because I was bored with what I was doing. And I found over the years that my decision to go to law school was the right one because I really have enjoyed the practice of law. And I hope that all attorneys find the challenge of staying on top of a constantly changing field also to be something that they enjoy. And I think that perhaps is the best way to look at the practice of law. It's a challenge, intellectual challenge, which can be fun.
Well, it's fun, and you've made it fun on so many fronts, Bob, and I want to thank you for not only taking the time today, but for your legal professional service, but you're also pro bono service. It's been above and beyond what most attorneys have done, and It's recognized by many, and so work well done.
No, thank you again, Greg.
Thank you.